A terrifying but true story I experienced when I was only 12 years old. I moved to my dad's when I was 10 and didn't know anyone in the area except for the family my dad was friends with, which was a single mother with 3 kids. Luckily for me, there was a girl a couple years older than me, 12 at the time I met her, and we got to know each other a little over the couple years. We weren't close, but ended up having the same friends. One night, my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because my friend's mom was at work, which is where this gets terrifying and kind of sad. Her mother had been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out her sister was in a mental institution and was recently let out. The night Rob is hanging out with my friend, they get a knock on the door. My friend thought it was just her mom. She knocks in a certain way when coming in, and answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, and he took off through the window to his house down the road. He never thought twice about it. It wasn't her mom. It was the sister of the lady her mom was helping, and she figured out through talking to her sister where her family lived, and her mom's working schedule, of course. She came in, and this is where I don't know the details, but to be honest, I'm glad I don't. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbors to call the police. The lady brutally murdered my friend a week from Christmas, decapitated her head, and left the body naked in the bathtub. This lady also hit her head. They had to look through the presents, and I don't know where they found it, but they did there. I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. My grandmother lives in a very old house, late 1700s-ish, which is surrounded by graveyards on both sides. The other day, my friend, who I hadn't seen for months, arrived at my house. We were walking along the old cobblestone driveway when he begins talking about his newfound spirituality, not in a religious context, but with regards of feeling tuned into things. I believed him. He had been away at a drug treatment program, and I believed that he had experienced some kind of spiritual awakening. Anyways, as we were talking, my cat walks over to us and starts rubbing up against my leg. After a while, I realize she won't quit, and she's trying to tell me something. I start to follow her, and soon I realize she's going towards the graveyard. Every time I stop following her, she turns around, rubs my legs until I begin walking again. When we finally get to the graveyard, she jumps up on a gravestone, balancing on the slender part of the gravestone. She will not move. My cat begins hissing when we try to take her off the headstone. We realized the grave was someone who had lived and died in our house. My friend took this picture of the cat on the gravestone. My Nan had a very good friend she also had known in her nursing days, and back when they both had their kids and had grown into women, her friend's ex-husband rang up my Nan. He was very depressed and needed someone to talk to, but my Nan had to say that unfortunately she couldn't go to see him as she had just had a newborn, my father. My father was young and needed breastfeeding, so my Nan declined to see the man. He said he understood and said, "I'll see you soon then." My granddad was working on nights at this time, so my grandma wasn't expecting anyone home or to visit until the next morning. At about 9 p.m. that night, she heard their front gate open. It was a very vocal gate. She liked it that way, so when she was alone, she knew when someone was walking up to the house. She assumed that maybe Granddad had been sent home or forgot something, so thought nothing of it. That was until the family dog Ben began to stiffen up and growl toward the front door, and nobody opened it. He began to bark. Nan insisted he had never been like that. He was a dog that had been brought up around 4 youngsters, placid, patient, and kind. She tried to get up and open the front door to see if some kids were playing around with her, but she couldn't. She was frozen in her place on the chair. She said she felt icy cold for about 2 minutes. The fire was blaring. Nan described that after the cold began to fade, she felt very calm and serene. She then heard the front gate go once more. In the morning, when Granddad returned home, she explained to him what happened and at what time. He told her he had some terrible news, that her friend's ex-husband had committed suicide about 8:50 p.m. that evening. It took about 10 minutes' walk to my Nan's house from this man's house. A few years ago, I was walking through the woods off a beaten path, and I smelt this really overpowering sweet smell. Being nosy, I pulled back to the undergrowth to have a look, and I found a dead body. The guy had clearly been out there for a while, and wasn't looking great. All swollen green and black with various runny bits, the local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. I called the police, who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere, it took a while for them to arrive, and got dark when I just sat there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out the man had committed suicide. For a long time afterwards, I had dreams about him, and he would talk to me, and a lot of other not nice things. Mainly about how he was angry I had disturbed his resting place, and he wanted me to kill myself. Probably just my imagination, but all pretty disturbing at the same time. He still turns up in my dreams from time to time. No doubt he will be tonight after typing all this. Way to listen to your intuition and be smart enough to watch him and make a choice in your split second. I know it's scary as fuck when your body goes into shock, unable to clear your mind. I was sexually assaulted on the streets about a month ago. I acted so quickly that the man was arrested and the police charged him with sexual assault within 15 minutes of the attack. Quick thinking is pretty powerful. It was a completely random attack. I had finished a good evening with one of my best friends, who lives in a large city, but never had anything violent or sketchy happen to me when walking home after the bar. I usually stick to busy but not too high traffic routes, since I know that men can and will pull up in a car if on too busy of a street. But quiet enough that if anything strange happened, a resident of a nearby home would take notice. I picked this particular street knowing that there would be a police station I would need to pass. This was my mistake. I was walking north, literally 10 seconds away from the station, listening to my music, when I realized there was a man directly on my left. He must have been following me, and he put his hand on the small of his back. It was then he reached under the long raincoat I had, that looked like a dress. He groped my ass cheek, and it all literally happened in a split second. A split second. I screamed and jumped back, up onto someone's lawn. I let him pass me, ripped out of my earphone, and screamed at him, "Do not touch me. You should never touch a woman like that, ever. I'm calling the police." As I was yelling at him, I stayed on the lawn so he would pass in front of me. I quickly crossed the street while on the phone with 911. They got his description, and I told them exactly what he'd been wearing: height and race, hair color, skin color. As I walked up to the station, 5 officers came out, and I gave the description to the man again, and 2 officers got into the cruiser and followed the directions as he went. I was very specific about what side of the street he was on and many other details. What was incredibly lucky was that a woman and her partner were getting out of a cab that exact moment I yelped and jumped away. They both followed me to the police station and gave their sworn statement, separately of mine. As I was giving my statement, one of the officers had chased him down and came into the room to tell me they arrested him. I went home that night and cried my eyeballs out. Called my mom and told her. I slept that night and spoke with another friend. All in all, it wasn't horrible. He was caught. The police followed up with me a few times and gave me his conditions after being arrested and charged. He had to go to court, and I am allowed to follow up with them to see what his sentence was. I'm afraid he would get acquitted, or some weird administrative mistake might happen, and he might not get sentenced. And honestly, I'd rather not know. Also the fact he made a $10,000 bail the next day. I found out when the cops called me to follow up. I have his name in a document from the police, but I don't care. I don't want to know. Either way, I got him in a fuckload of trouble for at least 24 hours. Bleh, terrible experience. Posted this elsewhere, but here it goes. Not me, but my sister. So growing up, my sister had an imaginary friend. She said she was an older lady, and she was nice, and her name was E. She talked to her and played with her, all that jazz, until she was probably 4 or so, and then she stopped. Fast forward to when my sister was about 10. My mom isn't home, and she got a call to the nursing home for her GPA, so she bolts with Pops. My sister and I shared a room at the time, and she was in there doing whatever, and I was on the other end of the house. All of a sudden, I hear the radio in our room click on. Turn all the way up, turn all the way down, and go off. This happened like 3 times, so I go in there to be like, what the fuck, kid, knock it off. She's sitting there on her room, just white as a ghost. I go over to the radio to unplug it. No plug, no batteries, only radio in the house. I looked at her and she goes, "It was E, I saw her, it was E." So I called Mom, freaking out. Mom is so upset. Apparently Grandpa has just passed away. Okay, weird, I dropped the incident, whatever. A few days later at the funeral, a relative comes up to us and gives us a pic she found. My sister goes, "Hey, it's E." It was pictures of my grandparents when they first got married. My grandmother died before I was even thought of, aka when my mom was 11. We lived in the home my mom grew up in. We have no pictures of her at all, as my step-grandmother got rid of them all when she moved into the house a few years after my mom's death.